So hi Shahrukh.
Hello.
It's good to have you with Sneha, Dr. Shahrukh.
Thank you.
And Sneha has been in the field of pediatric rehabilitation since 1996. And we just got a pediatric psychiatrist who has come to us willingly and said, okay, I'm here to help you. So over the years, what I've seen kids who come to me and looking at how they function sensory wise, there's a lot. See, sensory cannot be separated from emotion. I'm reading a book which is called as Emotional Life of a Brain by Richard Davidson. And how the root cause of emotions and how the root cause of all our interactions, human interactions, completely depend on our reaction and our interaction, how we respond to what comes in front of us.
Absolutely.
So I'm very happy to have you here. And from you, I would like to understand your role in this field of sensory integration. We all see kids who have, in inverted commas, behavior.
Yes.
It could be any behavior, aggressive behavior, sloppy behavior, not wanting to be with parents, not wanting to be with peers. So how can you define your role in this field, and how different are you from a psychologist? People when I say psychiatrist, they're like, do I really need one? So what do you?
Yeah. Well, actually, that's been very well put. The role of a pediatric psychiatrist is very new. We are still developing in the field. We have recently come to recognize that a pediatric psychiatrist has many different roles as compared to a psychologist. But before I answer that, you asked me about emotions and then the association with brain and senses. When we apply sensory integration, we usually do it for children who have had issues with sensory issues or with the sensory realm. My understanding, in having had my limited experience, is that every kid, be it neurotypical or neurodivergent, needs some exposure when it comes to sensory integration, just as they need exposure to academic exposure. For so long, we have ignored the idea that there are two aspects to intelligence. There is emotional intelligence and then there is academic intelligence. We put them in schools, we put them through a very concise curriculum, and they learn everything there is to learn about history and science and maths and English, but we tend to ignore the emotional side of things as well. I'm very happy to note that the schools nowadays have an entire aspect of classes which are dedicated to emotions. Parents are more aware now. They have ideas like emotional charts or feelings charts where pictures, expressions are associated with labels. So the education starts right at the beginning. With neurodivergent kids, I think somewhere we need more effort because the attachment of senses with emotions needs more working rather than just helping them be okay with either hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity. So the work becomes a lot more convoluted. Of course, a psychologist is very much a part of the care system. We are a holistic team. One cannot function without the other. I am actually more dependent on a psychologist than the other way around. But we also have to understand that not every kid comes with the same severity levels. Some have deeper issues, some need more extensive care, and some often come to us in a crisis situation.
Like what we had in the before.
Yes. So when a kid like that comes, where therapy has been tried or they have not been exposed to the idea, okay, what does treatment actually look like also? The point of diagnosis can be done by a psychiatrist. The severity can be understood by a psychiatrist. Of course, if I need more formal assessments, I definitely have to bring in a psychologist and I have to work with them. Research has shown that the symbiosis of therapy with medications has shown much higher, better, stronger results as compared to either one alone. So you have to always look at it. There are multiple therapies. When they happen together is when we get the best kind of care. So it's always a combination.
So I think you pointed out to a very important fact that it is not only the neurodivergent children who need sensory integration, but integration of the sensory systems is very natural into us as human beings, in our babies. What happens today is the exposure to nature is much lesser. We have nuclear families. We don't have a village to raise a child.
Absolutely.
So we have to create a village. And that's the reason we are, I think, here. So recently, I think about 2 years back, we had a good project with Don Bosco where we had this sensory integration for neurotypical children. And my God, I could just see them flowing in their energies, because sensory, when you say sensory, it's all about energies.
Yes.
And touch is a beautiful system to work with.
Absolutely.
When we say touch, it is therapeutic touch. It really helps you to calm down. It can help you to just jump up.
Yeah.
So touch can be used in variety of ways. Using touch, using your muscles, joints, movement, and how you would move with your vestibular system. So these three Powerpuff Girls, that is the touch, the proprioception, and the vestibular, completely rock the aspect where we say, can I attend?
Yeah.
Can I, sort of be in the classroom for some time? Can I connect with my parents? Can I connect with my friends? And that's where I feel that even typical children do need sensory integration. Makes a big difference into them. Parents, please try that out. So coming to the fact that you see a lot of emotions coming from the child, can you also define the relationships which parents should have? Because many times I see that the root cause is not into the child, it comes from somewhere else. Do you speak about that?
Absolutely. And there are two things that I've figured out when I have dealt with children. First, it's never the child alone. It's never the child that goes through the problem alone. There is always and always either one of the parents or the entire family setup that is involved. May not be the origin of the child's problems, but can definitely act as a trigger. That's one thing. Like you mentioned, we're living in a different lifestyle now. Mothers are working. They're going back to work much sooner than before. So the quality of, like you said, touch, mother-child bonding, that's so much dependent on touch, right? From breastfeeding till when they're sick or when they need more affection, the mother comes in the picture. That availability has gone down. The fact that we're now living in nuclear families, so the number of interactions, the number of people caring for the child, okay, if mother is busy, there is always a grandmother or a grandfather, or there are cousins, there are siblings. When we say nuclear families, we're also now noticing the trend where families are either one or a maximum of 2 children. There are no more siblings. So the idea of having the quality of touch through rough and tumble, through, getting your hands dirty, just by playing with your siblings, that's missing. So many things have changed. Schools are different. They're focusing so much more on academics now that some days physical activities are kept on the back burner. Absolutely. Things are changing, but I would say there is a positive spin to it also, where that same nuclear setup is also now a lot more aware. Okay, my child is not doing so okay. He needs help. He or she, I need to take him to a professional.
Yes, I agree on this.
That's
because many times the grandparents keep shadowing that, okay, the child is fine, he will walk, he will talk. Exactly. But expression comes even when the child is not born. Even in the womb, the child is trying to communicate to the mother, trying to talk to the mother. And if the child is not able to express by giving eye contact, I think there should be an immediate red flag which the parents should look at. Because as I was reading in this book, it's all about the frontoparietal lobe, which we have been gifted with as humans, the left and the right. And the left completely gives you the happy signals, and the right is the one which gives you all. Either you feel accepted or you feel rejected. So if a child does not feel accepted, does not feel in the realm of security, he obviously feels insecure. And that's where your right frontoparietal cortex starts giving you signals. So as a sensory integration therapist, I would say the best thing what you can give your babies and children is your time, your touch, and your space. It's very important to give them space within your space, not outside your space. Something what we call as co-occupation, co-regulation has to happen. So my next question to you is, when do you start with medications in a child?
Sure. I think when we were discussing in the last few minutes, I did mention that there were 2 things that I often see. The family, of course, one. The other being that the child almost always, like you said, even in sensory integration, it's the brain, but the body does show changes. So it's right now maybe our job as a whole, including the healthcare professionals, the teachers, the parents, the family as a whole, to pick up those signs that the child is showing. In a lot of situations, at least in pediatric psychiatry, by the time the child comes to us, the situation is so late or so severe that medication becomes an unwarranted option. I mean, we do have to start, maybe for a short duration, but that becomes something that's inevitable. On the other hand, the idea why we're doing this to generate awareness, to make sure that there are red flags or there are certain key warning signs if parents do pick up, then we may also reach a point where medications may not be required. Yeah. But the whole idea is to
So we have to work around an ecosystem, and the most important members of the ecosystem are the mother, who's that immediate connect with the child. The father comes next, and nowadays, of course, the nanny, because the nanny is the most important person in the household. Change of nannies affects the babies because there's a relationship which the baby develops with an individual.
Yeah.
And suddenly the next day she's not there. Imagine what happens.
And it actually has happened. I was seeing a child, and the parents had brought the child categorically after the nanny changed, and the child started having emotional issues. So the trigger was the nanny.
So we are humans, and as humans, naturally we have emotions, we have senses. Our sensory systems help us to develop a relationship with the world. If our sensory systems do not get the amount of response from the environment, either from the parent, either from my toys, either from my play, my sensory system is going to say, I'm going on a strike.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens in our children. It either goes on a strike or it starts behaving very weirdly. So the other day I had my laptop and I was wondering what's happening to my laptop, because it's just giving me wrong signals. Then someone said, is your mouse somewhere near mine? Needless to say, it was in my bag. So when the trigger was because the mouse was in the bag and I was typing on the laptop. And this is exactly what happens with our children who have sensory issues, that they are not able to understand that the trigger is from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So as therapists, as psychiatrists who are in the field of child mental health, we all work in understanding the triggers. We all work with looking at how we can stabilize the ecosystem, and that need not be with only therapies. Simple practices like heartfulness, mindfulness help the parent to settle down. And when you feel centered, when you feel grounded, when you can create a space of security and love within yourself, I think things become very easy for everyone.
Absolutely.
It's just about taking a breath and just being there.